Josh Al-chamaa, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So everyone's pretty aware about CrossFit and what is involved within it, but you compete a lot within the CrossFit teams. How does that dynamic work and what happens in a CrossFit teams race?
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, CrossFit in general is a unique and somewhat strange sport. Even as a CrossFit athlete, I would say it's very strange. I remember my first introduction to CrossFit. I thought it was wild. So anyone that's kind of new to it or just kind of starting to discover it, they may see it as something that looks chaotic, but there is a formula, there is a process to it. Um, I'm sure we can dig deep into that, but where you asked me about the team side of things, for me, the team, I've competed both as an individual and on a team, obviously making it to the highest level on a team. As an individual, I actually missed out on the games by 2 spots twice, and then got an opportunity to be on a team, so that kind of changed my focus a little bit. But the team dynamic is like any sport. You know, you're in an environment where you're working with people other than yourselves, so you have to deal with personalities, you have to deal with different skill sets, and you have to find the right skill sets that mesh together to make ultimately the best team, which we were very fortunate to do 2 years running. We came third in 2022 and number one in 2023, which also was something unique for the CrossFit Games, taking the same team back twice. That currently at the moment very rarely happens, which is also mind-blowing to me. But yeah, in terms of team dynamic, there's a lot of things that go into play. There's a lot of training. There's a lot of outside kind of hanging out and gelling and getting to know your team, because you know when you're on that floor for 5 to 6 days, whatever it may be, it's the most intense period of the year for sure.
You mentioned that CrossFit was wild, especially when you first started. I got this quote that actually made me laugh out loud. This is when you did your first CrossFit class in 2016. I was confused because everyone ripped their shirts off and ran around like wild animals.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it is. Yeah, I think so. I came from in my younger years. I did a little bit of fighting, taekwondo, and then I went into dance. So I was a dancer. I did contemporary ballet, especially the contemporary ballet side. Everything is so strict and so formulated. It's not chaotic by any means, unless they plan it to be chaotic, which somewhat seems a little weird. So from that, I kind of found myself wanting to get stronger, wanting to get bigger. So I went into this kind of bodybuilding world, what I would call a globo gym, training the typical International Chest Monday and all that type of stuff, where, everything is very regimented, to then walk into a CrossFit space where it's all play. And I think that's what makes CrossFit so exceptional, that I'm a 32-year-old, well, nearly 32 on Sunday, but I'm an adult that gets to play, right? And I think that's what, in my opinion, I'm still young, but in a sense will hopefully let me live a longer life. Too many people deviate away from playtime, especially as adults. So that was the most unique thing for me, walking into that space and seeing it. I was definitely someone that was very reserved. I was very shy. I struggled speaking in front of a group. So the fact that I found CrossFit and became a coach and have stood up and done, big talks and stuff like that, is amazing to me. It really brought me out of my shell. But yeah, it was chaotic, but also soothing at the same time, which is very strange.
So your team leader, when you're choosing a team, what sort of qualities are you looking for? Because we had Mike Stroud on the show, who was the expedition partner to Ranulph Fiennes. And Ranulph Fiennes, a famous explorer, used to choose his expedition members not on qualification, but on personality. Are they
100%.
just positive people? How does that
100%.
then play out? Because obviously there's an intersection between personality and performance. Like, you want them to be really good. What are you sort of looking for in terms of the qualities of your team members?
I think first and foremost, you have to respect and understand each other. I think that's a primary quality. Skill set is very important, but you're probably not going to be in. This is going to sound douchey of me, and I don't mean it in this way, because I will train an environment in front of with anyone. But in the season, when you're getting deep into it, you're probably not going to be in the same room as each other if you're not a good athlete. So that kind of takes the searching for the good athlete out of the realm of what I'm looking for. It's having different personalities. Like, if we take every person that was on the team, we're all very different, and we all work differently. And I could almost break that down in the sense that, like, I'm a lot more free spirited, outspoken, somewhat. I almost describe myself as mom because if I don't like something and I don't agree with it, I'll say it. I struggle keeping my mouth shut. Then there's other people on the team that are very regimented, doing things by the book. Jorge, one of my best friends now, he loves a plan. He sets himself up for the best success. It has to be very regimented. Dev is turning 22 years old, so it's working with a 22-year-old who is an incredible athlete, but again, maybe a little bit more free spirited like me. So, and then Britt as well comes into the equation. Britt, essentially, her dynamic is she loves, like, she is a workhorse. She'll work hard, but she wants to be told. So if you tell her do this, she's doing it exactly how you tell her to do it, which is, a great quality to have with someone that you're working on a team with. So you have to have these different qualities that come together and create one. We're almost like a great but somewhat dysfunctional family in the sense that I'm like the granddad. Britt, sometimes acts like the mom. Dev's the child. There's all these different kind of plays in our team. And I think when it comes to choosing the right team, it's less of a choice and more of they find you. Like, you find each other. It's really weird. It's like, you don't, like, if I'm in a situation where I'm like, is this the right person? Are we going to work well together? We're probably not. It's a very natural process. It's almost like it was meant to be, even me being on the team in 2021, I was competing out in Dubai. Obviously, it was the COVID year. Things were shifting, or the end of COVID. So I couldn't compete in the UK because a lot of things were closing down. I went to Dubai. Finally got my visa to come back to the US. But when I was in the US, I got stuck in LA. I couldn't leave until my visa was processed. Then I got the call from Invictus to come to Invictus. So again, it's a natural process. It's like I was never searching for it, but it was always there for me.
You mentioned that CrossFit for you is like an adult version of playing. It seems quite representative of your philosophy in approaching the CrossFit Games, because you seem to do it for your personal self rather than all out performance in that way. And especially when it comes to like your nutrition, you say you don't even count your macros. That's quite a balanced approach for what would be a professional athlete.
Very much so. Some may say, well, maybe that's the reason why he's not a number one individual competitor. But I would say, but that's the reason why I am a competitor, because I'm able to find balance within my lifestyle. Now I know that there's many sports out there where this becomes a little bit more challenging, but when you're in a sport like CrossFit, where it is performance based, the way you look is not as important as the way you perform. So if you can find the process which allows you to perform at your best, or what you believe is your best, because at the end of the day, I believe our best is unfiltered. We can always get better. But what I believe is my best at that moment in time, I'm going to find that through balance. I'm going to find that through being playful, having a good time. If I don't have a good time, I don't compete well. I had a situation a couple of years back where I was competing individual. I did an event. I was nervous about the event. It didn't go too well. The next one I came out, again, it wasn't a great event, but I said, you know what? I'm just going to smile, have a good time. I believe I was rapping along to a 50 Cent song while I was doing the movements. And I ended up being top two in the event. It was an event that typically wasn't a good event for me. It's just because I had a good time. And that was the turning point for me, where I realized the better the time I'm having, the better I'm going to perform. Now, look, there's going to be circumstances where I'm having a good time and someone's just worked a little harder than me, maybe, and they're out there and they're going to do a little better. But as long as I put the groundwork in and I do as much as I can do in the gym, ready to perform, I have to go out and have a good time, because I work way too hard at this to not enjoy myself.
That seems like a really healthy approach, but if someone was to play devil's advocate to it, and especially online, there's a lot of talk about never leaving anything on the table. What would you say to someone who would then accuse you of leaving stuff on the table by not having such a regimented, all-out approach?
Well, I think sometimes that can be misconstrued. The idea of having a good time is leaving things on the table. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think it just depends on how you work. If you look at the Dennis Rodman approach, he had to go out on a bender and get drunk and come back and play the best game of his life in the NBA. So there's just different processes that work for different people. Um, sure, maybe there are some things I'm leaving on the table, but first and foremost, am I happy? Am I having a good time? Are my family healthy? Are they having a good time? Are they enjoying me watch what I do? That's all that really matters. For me, there's different types of athletes out there. I recognize that I'm older in the sense that I'm not 24 years old. I'm not striving for this thing. I know who I am as a person. So I think now I just get to enjoy what I do. And like I compete because I love it. I don't compete because I have to.
You mentioned that you're older. In your younger years, you also said you were a dancer. How does that, if at all, impact what you're doing now as a CrossFit athlete?
Yeah, it's looking back on it, it was probably one of the greatest things I could have done because CrossFit requires a lot of
It's not a
spatial awareness.
natural transition, is it? I don't
No,
think there'll be many people. It's quite a funny
well,
one, but it's not natural.
well, to be honest with you, me even being a dancer wasn't natural in the sense that I mean it was natural because it played out the way it should have, but I growing up, I grew up in an environment where dance wasn't a thing. I was doing it in the confined space in my bedroom, listening to Justin Timberlake, popping and locking and doing all of that stuff. And a teacher discovered what I was doing and kind of set me on the trajectory into dance. So that didn't feel natural essentially for me at that time. But I will definitely say the benefit of a movement or a skill set like dance or gymnastics or anything that requires you to understand your body in space and time will drastically benefit you when you come to CrossFit, because CrossFit is all about spatial awareness, understanding your body. Gymnastics is a huge portion of CrossFit, but also weightlifting is a huge portion of CrossFit. And being able to weightlift efficiently, especially now, in the sport, if you're not snatching 125 plus kilos, I'm trying to do the conversions into kilos again now, and 155 plus clean and jerk, you're probably not going to make it as a high level athlete, and you're not going to lift those numbers unless you know how to move your body well. So the being able to adapt from great mobility and dance into CrossFit, which allowed me to move, has been tremendous. I'm not someone who typically was very strong in, say, strict pulling, strict pull-ups, that kind of stuff. But because I was a dancer, I know how to use my hips. Well, in CrossFit, we kip, right, to allow us to complete more reps. So that kip comes from the hip. So there's a lot of things that I learned in dance that transitioned over into CrossFit for sure.
In the new Barbie movie, all the extras, the director made sure that they were all dancers because she came from a dance background, and she was just saying that dancers hold themselves just so much better because
Mm-hmm.
they're so much more aware, and then they make
Mm-hmm.
so much better extras on a movie.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get an invite to be an extra on the Barbie movie?
I didn't get an invite to be an extra on
What?
Barbie, but if I did, I definitely would have taken them up on the offer.
A few years ago, you moved to America from the UK. What was the thinking behind that?
I met my incredible wife, and a good woman will make you do some crazy things. Honestly, I always knew, especially when I discovered that I really wanted to be a competitor in CrossFit, I felt like America was really leading the way in terms of competitors. So I've always been the type of person that puts myself in the best possible environment to be the best version of myself that I can be. So I'm always going to take myself to those places. Whatever skill that may be, I'm going to seek out the best people and I'm going to try and be in that environment because that's how you grow. So I discovered that, America would be a great place for me. So I just started coming out. I was fortunate that my brother was already living out here. He was living and working in LA, in West Hollywood. So I just came out, was hanging out, and lo and behold, I ended up meeting my now wife in the gym. She subsequently lived like 2 blocks from my brother. So again, all these things naturally just happen over time. And we didn't force anything. We actually came back to the UK for a little while and then just decided, no, America was the place for us. And we were very fortunate in the sense that she had a permanent green card. I was going through an O1 process for an athlete that then soon changed afterwards, but I was going through that process anyway. So things just worked out.
You met your wife to be in a gym. That's like every gym bro's absolute dream.
Yeah. And for all those people out there saying I tried to meet an American woman, she's actually from Newcastle. So stop it.
Do you think that we've reached peak CrossFit? Because there's lots of different disciplines coming in now, like Hyrox, etc., which are all quite a similar thing. Do you think that CrossFit has a future, like as big as it has been over the last couple of years?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think I actually think it's not even scratched the surface with what it could be. Now, I have a different process on sport in general. There's things that I would like to see happen to it from a standpoint of making the athletes more financially better off, and there's a lot of things that can be done to help that. Unfortunately, I will say that CrossFit is very much a controlled environment. It's controlled by CrossFit, which hinders the growth of bringing in external parties. But I do think there's growth for that to change and for those things to happen. When we look at races like Hyrox, even turf games, all these other type of events that are coming up, I think all of them are exceptional because I actually take part in all of them. I've done a bunch of turf games, I've done Hyrox races and whatnot, but they're just not the same in the sense that what CrossFit does. Actually, they open up the door for, athletes that maybe can't do that higher skill movement. So, technical gymnastics, that kind of stuff. You can go to a Hyrox race and you can have a good time. You can do world champs and all that stuff. And they are, again, undoubtedly exceptional athletes. It's just different. It seems like it's a similar process because of its functional fitness, but I think CrossFit is very unique in the sense that it's functional fitness on steroids, dare I say. It's different. When you look at a CrossFit athlete now, like, it's funny. A lot of people say, "Oh, well, look at CrossFit athletes. How have they got abs that are so defined and so big?" But I think it's me and my buddy Chandler were talking about this the other day. It's one of the sports that is very abdominal. We train our abs pretty much every day. Now, whether that's healthy or not, I can't tell you right now. But anything that you do to extreme, may I add, is possibly not healthy. I think CrossFit is one of the healthiest sports in the world until you become a high level competitor. Things change. It's like anything. If you go to the gym and you exercise, it's the healthiest thing in the world. You become a bodybuilder, that's changing, right? So I think there is definitely room for growth for CrossFit. And I don't think the other sports, either like Hyrox or like turf games or anything like that, hinder it. I think they only help grow it. It's an introduction point, but they have their own thing, but it also elevates the space. I think there's enough space for more fitness to be around for sure.
Where do you see then the future of the CrossFit Games going?
I mean, I would love to see, the stadiums and the arenas full every time they put on an event. And I think it's definitely possible. I think the only process that we struggle with currently at the moment is formulating a way where, like, my mum turns on the TV and understands it. There's the challenge at the moment, right? And that's what we need to get to. And I know CrossFit are obviously working ways into that. They're creating, something they didn't have before is even lanes out in the field. So you can see they've got pylons where you move the pylons so you can see who's moving where at any given time. I still think that could be cleaned up a little bit. It's still a lot of back and forth and it can be a little messy. I see CrossFit, back on the big sporting channels. I would love to see, when the semifinals come out, you have it streamed, globally, not just through YouTube, but through those international channels. But the only way to do that is to bring in non-CrossFit dominant brands, right? And unfortunately, CrossFit has their process. They are a company that has this war on soda and, all the companies that will pay the big money to have it on TV. So until we can break those barriers and understand that, there's still health in unhealthy things, right? Anything done in moderation is still healthy.
The ends
Um,
justify the means.
Yeah, and that's the thing, unfortunately, like this is a consumer world, and for the big corporate companies to put you on the big platforms, they need to see a way of making money, and if that doesn't happen, it's gonna hinder slightly. There's a balance in that, there's a balance in anything. It's like, CrossFit. You'll never see CrossFit talk about Coca-Cola, but I'm an athlete and I love Coca-Cola. I drink Diet Coke, right? So it's just understanding that you can be an athlete at the top of your game and still enjoy these brands that maybe are not the ones that are the pinnacle of health. It's just moderation and everything. I feel like I
We had
deviate from your question there.
it's great. We had a professional Nike athletics 5,000 meter race run this past week, and we were talking about training methods. And in athletics, there's something called the Norwegian method, which is kind of hitting off at the moment, which is basically just a lot of double days running at threshold pace. Is there, or can you see any evolution or even revolution in the training that you as CrossFit athletes are doing? Because it's quite a new sport still per se compared to these other sports. And is everyone pretty much training the same? Has anyone got some secret sauce in which might go mainstream anytime soon?
It's a lot more calculated than it used to be. So CrossFit historically was all about how big of a hole can you dig and then can you climb out of it, right? It was like, how hard can you go and then keep going? And that's definitely not the case anymore. In fact, it's actually a misconception, and it's something that I would like to get across to, your everyday fitness goer that thinks they can just turn up to the gym 7 days a week and go ham 24/7. It's just not sustainable. And even us as athletes, we're not doing it. What I will say is we now focus a lot more on different energy systems and how we're applying ourselves to those energy systems. So, for instance, um, again, just because I'm working very closely with him, me and my buddy Chandler Smith, he talks a lot about like breathing hard and how often he's breathing hard, and he calculates how often he breathes hard, and if he passes his requirement for a couple of days, he'll reduce it for the next couple of days, so he's not going into that threshold. And I think a lot more athletes are calculated in that sense. We're working a lot more on strengthening weaknesses, so that if that may be gymnastics, we'll be doing gymnastic work, but it won't be to the point where it's like super fatiguing. And I think that's probably been one of the biggest changes in CrossFit. Also, the way CrossFit used to talk about nutrition has somewhat changed. All the keto stuff and all of that, that's kind of out the window, because now it really is just about performance. And actually, you'll see, I wish a lot more athletes would talk about it, because not enough athletes do it in all realms of sport. But you'll see athletes, enjoying the good food, what I would call sometimes, because they know that their performance is key, and actually all they've got to do is get calories in sometimes, or most of the time rather. So there's some changes there as well. But I would definitely say like energy systems and how we train, and the amount of fatigue we put our bodies through is changing. Now that doesn't mean that when it's time to go, we're not doing these extremely insane workouts, but it just means that we're recognizing the importance of the recovery stage on our body. Sleep is definitely a big thing that's being kind of driven in CrossFit.
What sort of food energies are you really prioritizing? Because obviously you need a lot of protein from all the strength stuff you're doing, but then also need the carbs because you're doing a lot of high intensity. Is it prioritizing one or the other, or is it just a lot of volume of everything?
So for me, again, this may not be the right way to go. I definitely find myself eating more protein and fat easier than I do carbs. I actually struggle a little bit with having too many carbs. It just makes me feel slow and stodgy. Maybe I'm not calculating my times correctly, but I'm definitely one of those athletes that I would say like I almost undereat throughout the day and then overeat in the evening, just so I feel like I can perform better. Something I really struggle with, and I don't know if others can connect with this, but when I compete, I actually struggle to eat at all. So then I'm trying to find quick carbs and sugary things to try and keep me going until I finish competing, just because I don't know what it is. It's not even nerves, because I love being out on the floor, but my stomach just doesn't tolerate having loads of food in it. And I think that's just because over the years, I've typically been someone that will eat very, very light in the morning. And then gradually, as the day goes on, I would slowly pick up. So then when I go to competition and all of a sudden everyone's like, get this oatmeal in you and eat this. And I'm like, I can't do it. I struggle. But for me, yeah, definitely like protein is a big thing. Uh, if I was to even look at supplements, whey protein and creatine are the number one, in my opinion. Everything around that, I know there's many other things that people like take magnesium for sleep and that kind of stuff. I think they should be looked at in a sense where if you're not getting it naturally through your food, and you're not getting enough of it, and you're depleting yourself to the point where it's really affecting your performance, yes, add it in. That's fine. But I found myself many years ago going on holiday with an extra suitcase of all these different supplements, and I was like, for what? I should be able to eat this stuff. So I kind of refined it and pulled back from that.
How many grams of protein are you roughly aiming to get in a day? Obviously, it's workout dependent, or you just smash them. It doesn't matter.
Whatever my wife puts in front of me.
That is so good.
Yeah, look again, so for me the importance is that when I eat a meal, I want protein, I want carbs, I want fats, I want my veggies in there every time. Like if I see that on my plate, I don't care how much is there. I'm just going to eat it, right? But that's typically what I want. I'm not. It's again, this is something that I think throughout this next year, as I attempt to win back-to-back titles, I can maybe refine and clean up a little bit. But I think I'm very fortunate that my wife is willing to help and do a lot of that stuff. I don't question what she does for me, because it's worked all this time. Since meeting my wife, I've become a better athlete, a better human, a better person. So I don't question what she does or what she puts in front of me. And I just think when it comes to food, it's like I work so hard. I'm not going to be that person that doesn't enjoy my food. I'm not going to be the person that comes home and sits there with a dry piece of chicken and some broccoli, and like it's just that's not enjoyable for me. I would rather I'd rather train an extra 2-3 hours and eat something that tastes better than train a little less and have the I don't know. It's just it's for me. It's what works, you know. And like I said, I don't question what's put in front of me. I have a good team of people around me that help. I have good coaches. I have a good wife that takes care of me. So I'm very lucky and very blessed.
And on a training front, what's it sort of looking like now in the build stage and then leading up to a competition, how you adapt and things?
Yeah, so I'm definitely things are changing a lot right now. This period, as we're talking now, kind of end of November, early December, is like pre-season in the sense that you start seeing the pre-season competitions come into play. I'll be heading out to Miami middle of January to compete at Wadapalooza. Then I'll be going over to Texas. I believe I'm going to be competing at TFX also in January. It's like the back end of January. So you get these kind of preseason comps where you get to dip your toes in the water and figure out like where you could be fine tuning your performance. But this period of training is very much the interesting period because you're having that blur of where you might have been working your weaknesses in the off season. Let's say, for instance, and this is not the case for me, I feel like I have a general base on everything, so I just kind of tweak. But let's say you had a weakness of strength, you may work the strength in the off season, do some preseason comps, see how your strength is playing out, and then refining all the other work that you need to do ready for the competition season to really start when you go into the open, which is not so important for us higher level athletes, nor is the quarterfinals, to be honest. It's really the semifinals and games which will change. So we still have a long enough season. If you think between now and when I really compete at the number one thing that matters to me, the CrossFit Games, beginning of August, I've still got a lot of time, you know. So I'm still kind of, it's preseason, but it's a way of finding out what works for you. So my training right now, the way it looks, so I'm trying to get back to my 2-a-days. I obviously had a baby 3 months ago, so that changed a little bit. You know, I was really focused on the baby, and my wife is stepping in, and so I'm trying to get back to my 2-a-days. Typically, I'm looking at maybe 90 minutes to 2 hours a session, and it will start with. I like to always start my day with conditioning because I've eaten light and it's a lot easier to do. So I get that heavy conditioning in the morning, longer drawn out pieces, and then I'll go into my strength training, weightlifting, gymnastics, interval training later in the afternoon. Uh, with that said, I'm also I forgot running a Hyrox race in like 2 weeks' time. So I've been doing a lot of conditioning for Hyrox as well.
So you say conditioning, say someone doesn't know what that means.
Sure.
What do you mean by conditioning?
So conditioning is anything which is low skill and pretty high output for me. So anything that involves running, rowing, skiing, biking. Sometimes there might be a little bit of skill work in terms of low level gymnastics, but often not. Especially with like the Hyrox season, what I'm doing now, there's a lot of burpee broad jumps and that kind of stuff. But usually it's like I can have anything from 4 10-minute window intervals of like running, rowing, skiing, that type of stuff, right? So it might be like a 40 to 50-minute workout, just low skill but high output work. And that typically is what I would classify as conditioning. The minute you start getting too technical with it, it's kind of funny. I go to some classes and people put in barbells and stuff, and for me that's not. I mean, it can be, but I'm old school in the sense that if I say I'm doing conditioning, I'm doing something which is I don't know, more. I don't know. Lower skill is the best way that I can describe it. But I'm also someone that, you know, like yourself, loves to cycle, loves to run. So that for me is conditioning work.
Is that an industry-wide thing to put the conditioning first and strength after, or is that more of a personal preference?
It tends to be the typical thing to do. However, I would always recommend someone putting their weakness first. So, for instance, if you are someone that has a great engine and you're really good when it comes to cardio-based work, then you should strength train in the morning and then do your conditioning in the afternoon. Um, a lot of people don't do that. I always advise people when I stumble across someone. We had one chap in our gym who was very good at conditioning and he was working on his strength and he kept putting his strength in the afternoon. And for me, you've just depleted your energy system and then you're trying to lift. So it just doesn't make sense. Usually, like anything in life, I always say, do the things that make the most sense to you, right? Sometimes we do the things that maybe someone said, oh, you should do this, but we know deep down, I think as human beings, we know what's right and wrong and what's going to work and what's not. We often just avoid it or we don't do it because it maybe doesn't go with the ethos that someone else has shared with you. But for me, I'm always like, what makes the most sense? Does it make sense to lift when I'm tired? Probably not. I'm not going to lift the most weight. So I have to adapt that.
You've done a lot of coaching as well. It's quite unpopular in a way because people don't think that you can coach your way to being an athlete, but you seem to have disproved that method. How have you sort of balanced the two and also taken what you've learned from coaching to performance and vice versa?
I'm trying to figure the best way to say this. Every human being has the ability to put on multiple hats, right? So I don't believe in this idea that just because you're trying to be an athlete, you can't be a coach. I remember when I was first coming up and someone said to me, why do you want to coach? And I said, because I want more time to be an athlete. And they're like, wait, what? That's not why you become a coach. And I said, well, why? And they said, well, because to become a coach, you have to be a really good coach. I said, I'll be a good coach when I'm coaching, but when I'm not coaching, I'm going to be a good athlete and have more time because I won't be working a 9-to-5 job, right? In fact, I actually worked a 24/7 job once I became a coach, but that's a whole nother story. Things change, but I wanted to do what gave me the most time in the gym, in an environment where I would constantly be learning. Because even as a coach, I was becoming a better athlete because I was watching people do things that were right or wrong, and I would help them, which would help me essentially. So I do have this belief that you can put on multiple hats. But what I will say that contradicts that is once I started getting deeper into the high level competitive side of things, I found that selfishly my time had to be given more to myself than to others. So I stopped. I knew naturally at that point I wasn't going to be the best coach I could be, and I don't believe in being half-assed at anything. So I decided that coaching wasn't for me, and I took a step back, and now I just focus on being an athlete. But there is a period, or there was a period in my life where I was doing both, and they worked. In fact, they actually helped each other because I was going to the competition floor, learning all these different things, and then finding a way to mold that and take it back to the classroom and teach people, even if they don't want to be a competitor. Let me tell you something. When you go out and you try and get that new job, you're competing, right? When you want to get that, when you've decided you want to find yourself a partner, you're competing because there's someone else that's trying to get that same partner with you. So we compete in life. So there's ways of adapting what I do on the competition floor, bringing it into the classroom and teaching people how to move better, how to do things. So they actually went hand in hand. I just found that there was a point in time where it's like, okay, do I want to be a CrossFit Games athlete and reach the top of this world that I live in? Or do I want to just kind of gradually be taking the same steady steps? And I decided that for me, I had to make a change. And I did switch up the coaching side, but I do believe that you can do both for sure.
I want to get your thoughts on the internet phenomena of the hybrid athlete. So it's very popular across Instagram for everyone to label themselves as a hybrid athlete. And you are like the epitome of a hybrid athlete. You can lift and run and do all of this functional stuff. Do you cringe a bit when you see some guy who obviously goes to the gym and then ran a 5K once describing himself as a hybrid athlete?
I would love to compete against him for sure. So that if he's out there, hit me up and we could throw down. No, no. Do you know what? I don't cringe at anyone that's doing something that promotes health. What I do cringe at is people creating a false narrative and a thing that is not. If you're not doing things on social media that's thought provoking for others, that inspires them to follow a similar path, and you're doing it just for clout, that's when it becomes cringy, right? But if you're out there and you're a lifter and you decided one day to run a 5K and you loved it and you now want to be a hybrid athlete, hell yeah, you're a hybrid athlete. Why not? Like let's promote that if that's what feels right for you, but just do it in a way where it's more like organic and not to the detriment of making others feel bad about what they're doing. As long as that's not being done, then I'm all for it, And I think being a hybrid athlete is the best way to live. I certainly know for myself, right now I'm high-end competitor, but there's going to come a day where I'm not doing that. How would I like to train? Well, I want to do really nice long runs and cycle rides, and I want to bodybuild because why? I want to keep my engine primed, but I want to make sure that I have muscle, right? So that's how I would train essentially. I might take out the technical stuff because longevity wise, I don't know how great it's going to be for my body, especially to the extent that I'm doing it. You know, the weight that I'm throwing over my head is, we don't know what it's going to do to my body. But what I do know is being able to run, cycle, and lift a little bit is probably the most natural thing that you can do. Swim too, like, you know, if you can breathe in underwater, you can breathe, you know, anywhere. So yeah, I think I'm all for it. I think hybrid athletes is the way to be. I think people are waking up, and I think CrossFit has helped with that. And it's kind of funny because, you know, the people that were doing the bodybuilding back in the day were like, "Oh, CrossFit is the scum of the earth," and then now all of a sudden people want to be hybrid athletes. So let's do it.
Hybrid athletes just CrossFit through the back door.
They do. They do CrossFit without gymnastics. But there's going to be a moment in time where you're going to start seeing these bodybuilders doing kipping pull-ups, and I'm going to be here like this with my coffee, just enjoying it.
I actually thought, and I haven't told anyone this but my wife, so it's a bit ballsy to say this out in front of you, but I thought of a better name than a hybrid athlete. Because if you think about it, why would you want to be a hybrid in a way? So you want to be a utility athlete. Because if you're a hybrid, you're like a Nissan Note or like something boring like that. If you're a utility athlete, you're like I don't know, like a Ford Raptor or a Toyota Hilux. You're like a pickup commercial.
Now you're a man after my own heart because you know what car I drive, don't you?
Yeah, man. Did you say you drive a truck?
I drive a Ford Raptor.
No way! Honestly, I said to my Emily, my wife, I said to her, I was like, if we ever go to America, I am buying a Ford Raptor. And I'm going to get like the biggest suspension ever, and it's just going to be epic. And I have off-road tires, even though I'm never going to go off-road.
Literally, I'm staring at my car right outside of my window. It's a Ford Raptor.
Bro, look at it. It's like a piece of art. It's just the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah, it's definitely a great car. I almost I'm not going to say what I think about big trucks because it's quite crude, but I do have a theory about big trucks, which makes me feel a little bit insignificant because I drive a big truck. But the reason I love driving the truck, I'm going to be honest with you, is the Raptor is fast, and I like fast cars, but it's also safe. So I love a safe car, and it's high up. So I don't know. Me and my wife, we have a Tesla as well, and every time I get in that, I feel like I'm sitting on the floor. So I love my Raptor.
That's so good. Okay, well, you can co-pioneer the phrase utility athlete with me.
I am a utility athlete through and through.
Coming to an Instagram bio near you soon. I have another unserious question. Is when you compete, you wear a headband, and obviously I realize that to do with sweat, but is it not just really hot to wear?
No, because the headbands that I wear are pretty thin. They're not thick headbands. They're not like normal shirt material. They're actually almost like they're like a pair of ladies' knickers in a way. I don't know if that was the best way of describing it, but
we're covering some seriously wild topics on this episode.
I don't know what's happening. I told you I like to have a good time. No, it's pretty thin, and it's like sweat absorbing for the most part until I sweat like crazy, and then it's no longer sweat absorbing. But I also do that because I do have longer hair currently at the moment. So, and I grew my hair out because I wanted to tie it up. My mother always says to me, well, why don't you let your hair down? And I actually hate the feeling of hair touching my face. So when I'm competing, I obviously wear a headband too. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I'm having thoughts recently of cutting my hair off, but then my father says to me, he's very old school, and he's like, if you cut your hair off, you're going to lose your strength. So he's messed with my head.
21st century Samson.
That's what he calls me. So
really?
Yeah.
Oh, so good. You've recently signed with Team 247, which is British brand Represent. How does a deal like that work? Is it quite transactional in the sense that they think you're cool and a great ambassador, so here's some money and some clothes, or is there more to it in approaching? Because it's quite individual. You know, it's not like a part of a team and you have to adopt the sponsors wholesale. You can cherry pick, as it were.
I think there's different ways of doing it with different brands. I'm very well connected with George and the team, and I would like to think, or at least he's told me, they signed me because they love what I do. They love my attitude and my approach to sport, and the way I promote things, which is for me why I would sign with a brand. We have to align and really like what each other does. But it is also transactional. I would be lying if I didn't say it was. I have to earn a living. I have to provide, and it's kind of funny as you get to a point in your career where you really believe in what you're doing. You have these random sponsors that will come along and say, "Oh, we'll give you some free supplements," or And for me, firstly, I have two processes when I sign to a brand. I have to really love it, um, so I have to enjoy your product. I'm not going to sign to you just because of. I'm not just saying this. I have another job where I make some money too. So for me, I have to really love your product, and then secondly, you have to come with a good offer, right? Because that's how I survive as well. I think where brands get it wrong is they think that they can pull in athletes with the idea of we'll give you some product because you're going to buy it anyway, and now you don't have to buy it. Well, lo and behold, I'm the kind of person that's very low maintenance. I don't really have to wear a shirt when I exercise. I don't have to take a supplement. So I have to really like your product. And I think I have a handful of brands that I work with, and I keep it that way because I believe in what they do and what they say. I'm also signed to Puma Footwear. I think they are the best and most affordable footwear on the market. They create the most exceptional designs, but also at a price point that everyone can afford. For the most part, I know they have some elite level running shoes, but their CrossFit shoe is £90. Like think of other CrossFit shoes out there which are 150. For me, that was a big driving force because I want to make sure that the young kids and people coming up in the sport that maybe financially don't have a lot of money to drop on something can go to a brand, and I want to work with brands that are doing that for people too. So there's also that. But yeah, 247 for me, I love what they do. I love the product. I found as I was aging and growing as a human being, my style was changing and it was becoming more like the 247 athlete. And George saw that and they spotted it in me, so we made a deal work.
And they have the half tights as well as the shorts. And from a technical point of view, what's it like to work out in half tights? Because that's quite
Oh,
a
I love
new
it.
trend. Oh,
Yeah,
really? Interesting.
yeah, I love it. Getting my quads out, absolutely. I will say though, it's probably not a good look wearing half tights and no shirt because then you've got a lot on display. So
Yeah.
I always make sure I have a shirt on when I'm wearing the half tights. But me, honestly, I think I like the half tights because I also come from a world where I love running and cycling. So it feels good for me to wear those. I love swimming too, so it's like the jammers. So now I get to wear them in the gym all the time. So yeah, I'm all for the half tight, and especially if you've got a decent set of quads.
How do you think fatherhood has impacted your training? Has there been anything that you've taken away from it apart from just 5 hours less sleep a night?
Do you know what's crazy? So the last month, my son has been sleeping, and people are going to hate me for saying this, but my son has been sleeping 8 to 10 hours a night. Isn't that nuts? And
I
actually,
can hear that. I can hear parents across the continent of Europe just crying.
yeah. So okay, I'm not gonna lie. We get up once in the night for a feed, and it's usually around 4:30. And then I'm very lucky. My wife will take that one because I get up at about 6:30 a.m. with him anyway. But he's going down to bed at like 7:30 at night, which is it's mind-boggling. Now, I'm sure someone's laughing because they're like, "Don't worry, there's sleep regressions coming." I'm sure they are coming. I'm not naive to that. So, from a sleep standpoint, I've been very lucky, in doing what I'm doing with fatherhood. If anything, I think I'm getting a little much too much sleep, which is probably affecting me. Um, but you know, yes, I would be lying if I said the training wasn't challenging, but it's not challenging for the reasons of fatigue. It's challenging for the reasons of I love my child. I love seeing his face. I love being around him. I struggle when I'm out the house or when I'm away from him. Like that, I've found myself in training sessions where I'm trying to go really hard, and then I just I start thinking about him and my wife at home, and it has messed with some of my sessions in the sense that I just can't focus. So that's been the biggest change for me, where I've had to really adapt to just kind of saying, well, you have this amazing life at home, but this is how you provide for that life at home, and you have to be in the moment when you're doing this. Like when I'm training, I have to really pull myself into the moment, and I struggle sometimes. There was a day I remember not so long ago. I went to the gym and I got there and started warming up and didn't feel good, and just wanted to be holding my child, and I left. I knew I wasn't going to get a good training session, so I went home and I did what I felt was most natural and felt right to me. But then there are other times where I have to really focus. And that's where the benefit of being on a team and being in an environment where, currently at the moment in my off and preseason, I don't train with a team. But when I go back into season, I'll be training with a team. That will help me through that, because now it's not about me or how I feel. It's about those three others that are waiting on me and depending on me to be there. So things change when that happens. But yeah, the biggest challenge is just being away from family. I love being around him. I feel like I went away for one weekend, my first weekend. I got invited to the Formula One in Vegas, and I came back 2 days later, and he had facial expressions I'd never seen before. I was like, "What? 2 days? I'm gone for 2 days, and this is what you do?" So that's probably been the hardest thing.
That's so wholesome. I love it. Just lastly, you mentioned just in passing on an Instagram reel about a nasal only breathing piece to get you maximally warmed up. What on earth is that?
It's hell. I hate it. My coach gives it to me, and it's not nice at all, because we started off with very basic nasal only breathing movements, which I don't know the technical side behind this, but what I will say is I breathe a lot through my mouth. And for me, when I get really fatigued and I start to panic, I don't use the inhale or exhale or anything through my nose. So I've noticed that has affected my performance, because if I don't relax my face, I can't perform the best way. Let me try and explain that. So there's certain situations where I'm doing certain movements where I get so built up and I'm not breathing properly, and I'm only using my mouth, whereas I could use an inhale from my nose, that I start to, like, my face changes in a way where it starts to feel the pain. And when my face changes, my body changes, right? It's like this knock-on effect. So my coach has started, and I don't know if this is the reason why he brought it in. I think he just brought it in because he wanted to mess me up. But he started bringing in some nasal only training pieces, especially like for warm up stuff in the morning. And it started really basic, like nasal only when I was on the rowing machine. And then I would maybe do like a few push-ups and that kind of stuff. And then now it's kind of turned into these like 20-minute workouts where I'm nasal only breathing. And sometimes it feels like my nose is on fire. But it's helped me control movements. So like, the whole point of it is, if you get yourself to a point where you can no longer nasal only breathe, you slow down. So if you're pushing your body where your mouth has to drop open and you have to breathe through your mouth, you slow down. You've defeated the purpose. So it helps my body stay relaxed and stay calm. And I know there's a lot of different breathing techniques out there. My brother has tried to explain some stuff to me about nasal only breathing, where people actually breathe for long periods of time, like meditation states, through nasal only breathing. So I know there are definitely some benefits to it. But for me, it is more just a case of keeping my body relaxed and finding a way of breathing differently to how I usually breathe. There's only so much air you can intake and exhale through your mouth, right? You want to use the whole process that you have of nasal and mouth. So I'm trying to still figure that out. I mean, I'm 32 years old and I've been competing for 7 years. I'm still trying to figure out how to breathe. So
how do you ensure that you don't breathe through your mouth? Do you have to like put a piece of tape over your mouth as you're on the ski erg?
Well, you can't breathe through it. Yeah, just keep it closed. You can't breathe through it if it's closed.
What's the thinking? Obviously, it keeps you relaxed, but you can breathe in a lot more air through your mouth. So,
yeah,
is it just increasing the threshold of
exactly?
Before you get, yeah,
exactly. And the process is the premise behind it is if you almost go into this, like, for me, what I've found anyway, I kind of go into this meditative state where I'm not focusing on, because in CrossFit, we do a lot of workouts that are really hard. We're trying to push ourselves all the time. I'm not focusing on how hard that workout is. I'm focusing on quality movement. And then can I get myself to a point where I'm moving at a challenging but sustained effort and still able to breathe under control? You're battling all these different things. And actually, another thing that's done for me as well is, if my coach puts something in there like 20 reps of a wall ball shot, and I'm doing nasal only breathing, and I'm trying to focus on how I breathe, but then remember the number of how many reps I've done, I'm now using my brain. I'm actually no longer thinking about, oh, this hurts, or anything, or I'm not even thinking about my family at home, because now I've got to think about, can I survive by breathing through my nose only, and do I want to do more than 20 reps of this movement? So you start doing that as well.
That is so good. Awesome. Well, I feel like I could talk to you for hours, but I'm really
like the least technical athlete you've probably spoken to, because I just do everything based on feeling. So I apologize.
I probably laughed more in this episode than I've done with anyone else. So this is just epic. Right, Josh, thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you taking your time out of the day to chat to us.
It's been a pleasure. It's been good fun talking to you.